Hey guys, welcome back. So today I wanted to talk to you about feeling stuck and why you may be feeling this way. We can't really talk about feeling stuck without talking about identity loss and life transition. And what all this really signals is that you're wanting to live a more purpose-filled life. And if we allow ourselves to really sit with it, the uncomfortableness and introspect, we can actually start living not only a more purpose-filled life, but a more healed life. So I experienced identity loss a few years ago when my daughter headed off to college. I was very much very attached to being like a single mom. And when she left, I really didn't know who I was anymore. And if you've experienced something like that in your life where you've now outgrown who you were or you don't really know who you are, what feeling stuck is really trying to tell us is that the person that you're becoming doesn't really fit the person or the life that you have right now. And what oftentimes keeps us stuck is our inability to take action. Or we're overwhelmed with just all of these emotions of being like in this in between and not really knowing what's next in our lives. We know what we don't want. We don't want this life, but we don't know what's next. And it just keeps us in this place because a lot of us have been relying for such a long time to have all the answers. If you think about it, when we grow up, we're often in this mold of like going to school and then you go to college or you get a job, whatever your situation is. And it's kind of like life is already set out for you, figured out for you, or even expected of you, whether it's society or your parents. And if you really haven't woken up or become more aware or really started owning what it is you want and having your own desires and really putting them out in the world, then having to do that bumps against everything that you believe or been taught in your life. So for me, I was actually a teen mom and then a single mom. And I remember that she just gave me so much purpose in my life, a sense of meaning. I just kind of wrapped my whole self around her and allowed that to really define who I was. I didn't have a lot of sense of worthiness growing up because of my upbringing. So I made her my everything because so much of who I was and my worthiness was put on a title on being her mom. When she left, I ended up having like identity loss and ultimately I had a breakdown because of it. And then that led me to a deep depression. What I didn't know at the time is that all of this was completely normal. Maybe not the breakdown, but that this was actually life transition. And I actually started to seek out not only the help to get therapy, but I also wanted to seek and do my research about what was really going on. I remember I found a book that was called Women in Transition. And there was a quote that I read, and it just, I don't know, it just opened up my mind and it made me feel like I wasn't so alone. It made me feel like this was completely normal and that I was going to get through this. And the author described life transition. When we start questioning our identity, our sense of self, our worthiness, or even our contribution, we've actually gone into a life transition. And things that actually throw us into a life transition are either a job loss, an end of a long term relationship, dealing with a death. And for all of us, we actually dealt with a collective life transition, which was quarantine. And what I discovered was that actually it could be something as simple as we're just not happy. And for some of us, we did what was expected. You went to school, you went to the right schools, you went to the right college, got a career, but you still find yourself feeling very unhappy. Because, like I mentioned, either your parents' expectations or society is what told you this life is what should make you happy. And for some of us, if you did grow up in a certain environment where there was trauma, you had to do adult things way before you were even an adult. Just like example myself, I was already on my own when I was a teenager and I was already raising a child. We were already in survival mode because of it. And so a lot of the times we had our dreams deferred. It wasn't even about the dreams that we deferred because of survival, but it was also that we never really took the time to sit down and ask what we wanted. And when you're living on survival mode like that, there's really no time to ask yourselves, what are my goals, my inspiration, or what are the dreams that I really have for my life? So when you get to a certain point in your life where you're no longer living off survival mode, when you actually start to change your habits and really have time to start introspecting, start to wonder like what would really make me happy? What would that look like? And that's where we start going to that next phase of being in that in between, like I talked about, that in between where we're so afraid that this is either not the life that we want anymore, this is actually life that maybe we didn't want, but now we actually want to move towards something that makes us happier, that makes us feel like more in purpose. And when we start actually not only questioning, but being in that place where we're kind of in the in between, like I mentioned before, knowing that we don't want the life that we have behind us, but not really sure what's next for us. And that could be a very overwhelmed and fearful part in our life. And that's why we start to feel stuck. And it doesn't have to be something so radical as you quit your job, you get a divorce. It doesn't have to be anything extreme like that. But maybe the action that you take is start taking ownership of something as simple as starting to really be honest with yourself about not being happy, about wanting more in your life and pursuing a more purpose filled life. So, what I started doing when I was going through that depression, besides getting counseling and starting to really sit with myself, and one of the things that you can actually really start doing today that'll help you get out of that stuckness is starting to journal, creating a safe space for yourself where you're actually able to work through all your emotions and start owning what you really desire, or start playing around with some ideas of what you could possibly want and what could be next for you. In this time, and I was researching, I also came upon a book that was called Life Transition. And in that book, there was two questions that he suggested to everyone that when you're going through a life transition or you're feeling stuck, that you should ask yourself. Because there's actually a pattern whenever there's big changes in our lives, we continue a pattern of a behavior that we actually had when we first started to face a large life transition as a child. And we've been dealing with major life transition or that being stuckness as an ongoing pattern. So, in order for us to start changing that, we really need to sit and introspect. And here are two journal questions that really started to help me. Number one, I kind of spoke about it already. When was the first time that you actually started to feel like this? And when I mean this, life transition, when did you start to question everything in your life? I know for me, one of the major transitions that I dealt with as a child was actually going off on my own when I was a teenager, and then also dealing with the trauma that I had dealt with at home that caused me to go out on my own when I was a teenager. And because I had ran away from home, I was now as an adult noticing that I was consistently running away from things. And now it was actually time for me to start sitting with a lot of the feelings and emotions. So for me, life transition actually became a time for me to introspect and to start really healing my past and owning what I wanted in the future. The second question is, when was the last time that you dealt with a life transition? So if you're dealing with unhappiness in a life that maybe you feel that you should be happy, or maybe you're starting to see that you've been on survival mode for so long that you've never been able to own what you really wanted. I know that making this decision to start owning and really sitting with myself started to actually change my life for me. The last transition that I dealt in and I'm still working through is I'm actually dealing with a disability. I have mentioned in previous videos, I'm actually dealing with a disability, and I was bedridden for months, then on a walker, and then on a cane. And thanks to having that foundation of journaling, of seeking therapy, of being able to build a safe space for myself, for my emotion and what I'm going through, it's actually allowed me to start rebuilding my health and also and avoid dealing with a mental breakdown and possibly have fallen into a depression. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I hope that the journal questions help you to start getting unstuck and taking action in your life. Please let me know in the comments below how you've dealt with identity loss or life transition and how you're dealing with getting unstuck. And as always, if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure and subscribe. Thank you for watching.